So the last couple of weeks I've been sort of making small iterative changes to random level generation, and it's a little bit weird. I keep expecting to feel like at some point I'm going to cross a line and it's going to feel like, okay, I have the complete feature set that I need for this roguelike game, and now I can start making content generation. But I don't know exactly where that line will be. I don't know exactly what features I'm necessarily missing at this point. So I've kind of just been poking at a few little things here and there, just based on what feels like it needs attention as I've been sort of testing the game. But yeah, it's a little strange. I don't necessarily have a clear roadmap for the immediate future. But what I have been doing this week is figuring out how I want to structure levels in terms of where I place doors that lead to sub-regions. Those sub-regions being, item shops, challenge rooms, all those sorts of things. Probably like, faction outposts and stuff like that. So what I'm doing right now is just based on the number of combat spaces in a particular level. I choose the number of sub-regions I want based on how many of those there are, and then I sort of go through a room at a time, and each one has an opportunity to have one or more doors that lead to these sub-regions. And it's feeling pretty good so far. In fact, I guess I'll just switch over the game here and sort of talk through it. I've been doing a little bit more work on seeding the random number generator properly for this game. Some of my needs there are a little bit different than they were in Zero. So whereas in Zero, some random numbers were deterministic, and so the actions that enemies take, the behaviors they follow, are always the same every time, but the loot that gets dropped from enemies and torches and stuff like that would be random every time you play the game and from one life to the next. This time, because I might want to support things like daily challenges, I want things like loot drops to actually be deterministic as well for a particular random seed. So I've been working on making those changes. So for instance, if I were to rerun this again, you would see that the item drop would be the same, and I'll come over here and this one will drop the little wavy thing here. Or wait, no, this is actually different. Forget I said that. I forgot I'm not using a fixed seed this time. This is actually random. I just happened to get the same item drop the first time. But yeah, so I've updated the list of enemies that can appear. So you'll see those little bug spitter guys are in this room. Right now it only chooses one type of enemy per room, but I have the option to mix and match those, and probably what I'll do is I'll find combinations of enemies that work well in conjunction, and make sure that when enemies appear in conjunction, it's in ways that make sense. But yeah, so as I play through here, you'll see there are doors that can appear. They are no longer hard-coded to only appear in the first room as they were in last week's video. And they can randomly be locked. Let's see what happens when I go through this one. So this one, there's nothing back here yet. This would be an item shop or an inn or a faction outpost or something like that. It's not a challenge room. If it were a challenge room, there would be enemies in here. It would have locked behind me, as you saw in the last 2 weeks videos, I think. But yeah, so I'm not populating item rooms yet, but that's what that would have been. Let's see what else. Treasure rooms can appear sort of usually at the end of long hallways like this. I'm trying to figure out right now if it makes sense to have branching paths, because right now it doesn't feel good. Like if I had killed all the enemies coming out here and then I just have to walk back through this empty space, that doesn't really feel good. So either I need enemies to respawn, or I need to construct levels in a way so they sort of loop back on themselves once you've found the treasure at the end of a branch. Or else I just need to make them actually more linear, like in Zero, which might make the most sense, because then I also would not need to worry about having a mini-map. And I don't necessarily think that, exploration and dungeon crawling is where the fun of this game is. So some of that stuff, I still sort of need to feel out, sort of figure out what makes the most sense, but I'm sort of getting all the features that I'll need for that working. I have a new weapon type too. This is Fang. This is a weapon that was not in Zero. Its range and its speed are sort of between the dagger, which I think I called the what did I call it? I don't remember what I called that one. But the dagger and the short sword, the talon that you start Zero with, it's somewhere in between those in terms of range and speed, and it felt like there was something missing there, so that's where that came from. I've been trying to make this experience of like losing an item and then trying to switch back to the sub-weapon that you just had, trying to make that feel a little bit better, because I know that can be frustrating. So what happens now is like when you pick up an item that you had already had, it bounces a little bit less. So you get less of that, like, oh, you know, the thing that I really wanted now just dropped, you know, in front of where I was trying to walk or whatever. So I'll probably play around with that a little bit more, but yeah, that was definitely something that I wanted to try to improve the experience compared to how it was in Zero. Some of these guys, like, you know, these flying eyeballs, probably I'll need to find better spawn points for these, because like he spawns at a height where he would, you know, the same height that enemies would be if they were walking along the ground, and that's not really where you want flying enemies to be. And especially too for enemies that like, you know, hang on the ceiling or whatever, I'll need to add new spawn points for those. And I have that the technology to have like different spawn points for different types of enemies. I haven't yet written the content to take advantage of that. So that's sort of when I'm talking about like, you know, feeling like there's some line that I need to cross before I start making content. That's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Like, I have features necessary to allow me to put different spawn points for different enemies. I just don't yet know whether, like, I guess whether all the code that I've written is actually what's going to ship, and I should start building content for that code. That's always sort of a tricky thing to figure out. Sometimes it feels like, well, maybe the code that I've been writing is all, you know, placeholder code for now, and I'll rewrite it with the real implementation at some point in the future. But you know, probably this is going to be the real implementation. Is just sort of how I frame that in my mind, I guess. I've been thinking a little bit too about what each of the different characters is going to bring to the table. You know, probably in the style of Binding of Isaac, I think every character is mostly going to differ in terms of their starting stats. So some characters might have more health than others, some might start with stronger weapons. Definitely one of them will start with the combat bracers, so like the up and down stab attacks. You know, one of them will start with the ability to do that. I'm probably going to put a double jump in this game. It feels like it would make more sense for this game than it did in Zero, and I always like double jumping games, so probably one character might start with that. Yeah, I'll be figuring that stuff out more in the future as I create all the art, all the sprite sheets for the characters too. The characters are going to be, I think I've mentioned this before, but it's going to be characters who you met in Zero. So of course, Viria will be a playable character again, but then Grackle, who I'm playing as right now, and then Thrush and Starling from Zero will also be playable. And who knows, I might also have like, you know, secret characters where like the Wayfarer from Super when the game comes back. We'll see. I guess that's most of what I've done this week. Sort of at a high level. I'll talk a little bit more in the blog about some of the details of what went into, you know, figuring out where to place those doors. There was a weird issue I ran into with the door placement where, like, if you had multiple doors in one room, you'd go through one and come back through the wrong one, or what was another one? If you went through the same door twice, the game would crash the second time because it had forgotten to serialize some of the components that told it where it was going to, and I had to make a few sort of low-level entity component system changes to fix that one, which was kind of unexpected. I think there would have been other ways to solve that problem, but this was the one I ended up going with. So yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit more on the blog, but yeah, so this is sort of the high-level glance at what I've been doing recently. It's starting to feel, you know, with more enemies and more things to do, I can get a better sense of where it's going. It still doesn't feel like a game yet, to my mind at least, but it's getting there slowly. As always, thanks for watching. This series is supported through Patreon. I want to give a shout out to Patreon supporters Jace, Benjamin, and Opine Nana for their contributions. You can find the links to my Patreon campaign below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.